Are you working on your author career but struggling to get that first book published? Does the goal of being an author seem too lofty? Or thoughts of having multiple books and making a full-time living are as fantastical as living in Cinderella's castle? Welcome to Discovered Wordsmiths, a podcast where aspiring authors can be heard. Join Stephen Schneider as he finds and talks to authors you may not know, but authors that have gotten their foot on the author career path. Hear what they've done to get there and where they want to go now. Settle back. It's time for a bit of inspiration and advice. Come listen to today's Discovered Wordsmith.
Hey, welcome to episode 58 of Discovered Wordsmiths. Today's episode, I've got another reader, somebody who has read tons of books and reads as a choice instead of watching things like TV and movies or things like that. Doesn't play video games or anything. So it's really good to listen to these and hear what other people who are avid readers like, what their habits are, what they read and why. And Dave is a good friend. I've known him for a couple years, and it was nice of him to get on, chat with me for a little bit about reading and books, which is something we enjoy talking about. So here we go. Before I ramble too long, let me present Dave. All right. Well, Dave, thank you for coming on the podcast. I appreciate you taking some time on this nice snowy morning to chat with me. To get started, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Well, let's see. I began reading very young. It was my great escape. I was one of those socially awkward kids. So reading was my great escape and salvation. I have been reading voraciously for many years. In recent years, though, I find that what I'm doing more is revisiting old friends. I'm doing more rereading than I am reading new material. Most of the material that I read now that's new tends to be best of the year collections for science fiction.
So your reading habits have changed as years have gone by.
Yes.
Okay.
I used to read something like 1 to 2 books a week, and now I read about 1 book every other month. Well, that's as in newer material. I usually have a book that I'm reading at almost all times. I have a book on tap where I am rereading an old favorite.
Nice. Okay. So what type of books and stories do you like to read?
I'm a very, very big fan of Terry Pratchett's Discworld novels. I would like to call them fantasy, but they aren't really fantasy in the classic sense. Terry Pratchett writes more about what happens after and they lived happily ever after is written. What happened on the job, what happened with your spouse, what happened with your neighbors, just the real world considerations as opposed to the deeper fantasy. But I like him mainly for his philosophy and for his humor. I keep discovering new layers of jokes that I had not caught on previous reads.
That's always fun.
I was a very big fan of Stephen King until he totally botched the conclusion to the Dark Tower series. I've been very unhappy with him ever since then.
Well, let me ask, which ending to that are you talking about? Because he wrote an ending where Roland entered, and that was basically it. But then later he amended because so many people disliked it, what happened inside. So which ending did you read, or which one do you not like, or both?
It wasn't Roland's entry of the tower that bothered me. And the one that I read was when he is in the tower, climbing up level after level and seeing various things at each level. In fact, I wasn't aware that there was a version where he entered and that was all that happened. That actually is news to me.
Oh.
No, what I'm unhappy with is what he did with the quartet, the group of heroes that he had established and made us great friends with over the course of the novel, and how it basically all went to hell. I was very unhappy. It was not necessary. There were better ways. I mean, if the great union of heroes had to end, there were other ways to do it than what he did. And what bothered me the very, very most was that he had things that happened that made no sense whatsoever. The bad guy, Walter, we have been chasing after and worrying about and scheming against and dealing with the entire series of novels, suddenly is dead. And he's dead because he was stupid. It doesn't match the history. It doesn't match the personality. I think he was just tired of writing him, so he just killed him off.
And that's a fair point. So, okay, you used to like Stephen King. What Stephen King books do you really like?
I like
did?
the way he writes. No, I'm still a fan of the older books. I like the way he writes children. Probably the best book that he's written involving the points of views and stories of children is It. And in fact, I read that every 4 or 5 years. I trot it out and read through it. To me, it is just one of his very best. I like the way the characters are established. I like the way the story trajectories evolve. I like the way that good confronts evil, even though there are some, not everybody lives, not everybody makes it, but the way he writes the stories, it works.
And would you say that's kind of the same feeling you get with the Terry Pratchett Discworld that you like?
No, Terry Pratchett doesn't go as deep into the, well, there are a couple of exceptions. He doesn't tend to get into the conflicts, the deeper conflicts of the characters and what is happening in their lives. Well, an exception to that would be Night Watch, which is probably one of his best, in which our hero Sam Vimes of the City Watch gets to go back in time and mentor himself. Hard to describe, but very well written. And in this case, he really does face some big personal demons, and he does face them successfully.
So you really do read quite a broad range. Some horror with Stephen King, some lighthearted fantasy with Terry Pratchett. What are some of your other favorite books, favorite writers, favorite genres?
Science fiction would be my favorite genre overall. Recently, I just reread Harry Turtledove. I don't know if you've read him. He tends to do alternate history.
Yes. Yep.
Yes. And I just reread The Guns of the South.
Oh, I love that book. I learned more about the Civil War from an alternate history than I did real history.
Yes.
So you're going back and reading some old favorites. Why do you think you're reading the old stuff that you've already read before instead of new things?
It's kind of like comfort food.
Okay.
In the pandemic, with all these things going wrong and all these things balking me, I like to go back to a place where I know what's going to happen, and I can get past the bad parts and celebrate the good parts. And it's rather self-indulgent, actually.
All right, and you also mentioned that you had been, now that you're retired, you had been wanting to go read to kids at the library, but that's gotten curtailed because of the whole pandemic. Why do you want to take some of your own time during your retirement to go read to a bunch of kids?
In a way, it's like this conversation we're having right now. The fun is in the sharing. If I can sit down with some kids and read a story that I know and that I like and share it with them and experience their experiencing of the story for the first time, it's just a very rewarding thing.
I love that. The sharing of the books. And I think we've, as authors, we talk a lot about, the best way for someone to get your book is to have it recommended by somebody else. And that's exactly what you just said you're doing, essentially. Have you introduced the kids to anything a little offbeat or different? Have you tried any Discworld, or what are some of the books you have read?
I did not get to do any reading for kids. I was just getting it set up, and then the pandemic hit. So the only scenarios I have are ones that I imagined. I never actually sat down with kids and read to them. Another thing that I was going to do was to do some reading for the library, basically putting books on tape. And again, that I was put into the the pipeline to be considered for that, and then everything shut down. That was more of an idea that hasn't happened.
So the library was going to kind of create their own audiobooks for their patrons.
I believe they were creating a series of audiobooks for the blind.
Okay. I would love to hear more about that. I love the things that different places and people are doing. And I think accessibility, the blind is one area that has not been helped enough with books. There's not enough books available, I don't think. And audiobooks are becoming big, but still not as big.
Yeah, I don't know if they would have had me reading books that already had audio versions. I would guess not. But then I didn't know what new books I would be reading. And again, I don't know if they would have necessarily had me. It was just I was in the pipeline to be considered, and everything came to a halt.
Right.
But I definitely like paper. I don't like reading online. It's just not an experience that I've enjoyed very, very much. I enjoy either listening to audiobooks or reading paper books. And I find that listening to audiobooks and reading paper books, even if it's exactly the same book, the two experiences are quite different. Different parts of my mind process when I'm hearing versus when I'm seeing.
Okay. I never realized or thought about it that way. But you enjoy both. And that's your favorite, print and audio.
Yeah, print is my favorite. One thing I've noticed is that I read very quickly. And I find that when I'm listening to a book, you can't skim. You can't start getting ahead of yourself and reading ahead. You are listening to words that are being spoken. You have no choice. You have to hear what is being said. And I tend to read a book a little more thoroughly when I am listening to it as opposed to when I'm reading it. Because when I'm reading it, if I get a little bored with what I'm presently doing, or if I get enthusiastic about what I know is coming up, I can start reading ahead or skipping.
Right.
And you can't do that if you're listening to an audiobook. It's a different experience completely.
Right. I know I listen to a lot of audiobooks, a lot of podcasts. When I listen to the podcast, I speed it up. But I don't do that with the audiobooks because I think I lose something of the fiction story if it's going too fast. It doesn't bother me with the nonfiction talking interviews and stuff. But yeah, I definitely can see that. I don't read super fast. I know my wife reads a lot faster than I do. When she gets a new series that she enjoys, by the end of the weekend, she's 4 or 5 books into it, which is much faster.
Huh. Yeah, it sounds faster than me too.
Yeah, she's gotten the Stephanie Meyer rewrite Twilight book, whatever it's called, I forget. In one weekend, she's almost done with it. It's one of those.
Wow. Yeah. When I reread it well, it depends on whether you're looking at paperback or hardback. It's either something like 1,100 pages or something like 1,400 pages. And it's as you can tell from the numbers, of course, it's a very large book. I think if I hadn't paced myself, I probably could have read that in one weekend. As it is, I was limiting myself to only a certain number of hours a day, so it lasted about a week.
It's the same feeling with like binge watching shows. I know a lot of people get upset, like The Mandalorian or The Stand on CBS. Well, just put them all out at one time, give them all to me, and I can watch them in one night. But I personally don't like to do that because you lose some of the experience. You forget about it too fast. It has no personal meaning for you if it doesn't kind of bubble and dwell within you for a while. So
right.
I do the same thing when I read and watch stuff.
Yeah, I can't binge watch at that level. Normally, if I am binging my way through a show, I usually can watch, if it's hour-long episodes, I can maybe watch 3 in one day.
Right.
More usually, it will be 1 or 2 to give it time to percolate. What was the term that you used? Dwelling within?
Yes. Yeah. It like festers and bubbles and grows within you. I definitely, you know, I think of all the great stuff I used to watch, you know, Star Trek, MacGyver and that. And if I had just sat down and watched them 7 seasons in a week, I probably would have forgot it by now and it wouldn't mean anything to me. And
well, you get saturated
yeah,
when you have a certain type of input coming in. You need to stop and either have nothing or have something completely different coming in for a while, or else your mental receptors just sort of numb over, and the new stuff is not being assimilated. It's just flowing like water off a duck's back.
right. Yeah. And I think people miss that experience. It's the same with music. You know, the kids get on Spotify or YouTube and they can listen to every album, every song by an artist and discover it, listen to all of it in a weekend and put it away. But there's some classic rock that there's an experience to listening to it. And the same goes for reading.
Agreed.
All right. Well, Dave, thanks for taking a couple minutes. I appreciate you. This is kind of a new thing for me, talking to readers about what they read. So maybe we'll have you again sometime and see how things are going. If you get to read with the kids, that'd be great.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks for the opportunity to chat with you.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Discovered Wordsmiths. Come back next week and listen to another author discuss the road they've traveled, and maybe, sometime in the near future, it might be you.